All right, we're going to begin talking about the presidency of the United States. First thing up is going to be formal qualifications. Formal qualifications of the president. Number one is going to be age. The president has to be at least, person to be president has to be at least 35 years old. You can actually run for president as 34, as long as you are 35 years old by the time you take the oath of office. You must be a natural born citizen. What this means is that at the moment of birth, you must be a citizen. You can't have acquired citizenship after birth. There is some controversy as to whether this requires someone to be born in the United States. Some legal experts say that it does require that, although most legal experts say that it does not. There are two different ways in which an individual can acquire citizenship at birth. One is by being born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction. Another one is to be born to U.S. parents. So, but whatever the case, you can't be a naturalized citizen. You must be a natural born citizen. You must also have been a resident of the United States for 14 years. And because of the 22nd Amendment, you cannot have been been elected to the presidency more than twice. Well, when we look at these formal qualifications, these really don't restrict too many people that would stand a real chance to be president. Obviously, it theoretically excludes everybody under the age of 35, but realistically, how many 35-year-olds would actually stand a chance to be president? So for the most part, these formal qualifications don't really restrict too many people. What does restrict people would be the informal qualifications. To be president of the United States, there are various informal qualifications that we usually look to. These are the demographic characteristics of most of the people who have been elected to the presidency. First one is going to be prior office. Typically, most presidents have held some sort of prior governmental office. Governor, senator, that usually is a big one. Other positions such as representative, maybe a cabinet secretary, and so forth. Another one is going to be party nomination. Okay, once you have political parties, if you don't receive the nomination of one of the two major parties, the probability of you being president is almost non-existent. So for someone to be president of the United States, they must be nominated by a major party. You have to have a relatively clean record. Now, what that actually entails is up for debate. It's a variable based upon the society at the time. We can go all the way back to Bill Clinton, and he made the revelation that he had tried marijuana when he was in college in the 1960s, and this caused quite a bit of scandal. He tried to cover it up by saying he didn't inhale, which, at least in my opinion, is almost laughable. I mean, I'm sure that he probably did. Why else would he try it? And then he went on to say that he never tried it again. Then you had you had George W. Bush, who was alleged to have used cocaine on various occasions. He also had a drinking problem that manifested itself in the form of a DUI, but this was overlooked on the part of the American people because it was sufficiently in the past. Our current president, Donald Trump, has a colorful history of behavior. But for the most part, people do look for someone who doesn't have a consistent pattern of misbehavior. I would say a felony probably would exclude someone, but past behavior the unacceptable past behavior that is sufficiently in the distant past, probably is going to be overlooked by the American people. Having a military background helps, although it's definitely not a requirement of the Constitution. We tend to like people who have served in the military. Military generals, we tend to like those. College degree, we like individuals with college degrees. All modern presidents have had a college degree. And then there are some demographic considerations. Typically, you don't see poor people being elected president. We look for someone who's at least upper middle class, wealthy, for that person to be able to mount a successful bid for the presidency. All presidents up until the election of Barack Obama have been white. All presidents have been professed Christians. Whether they actually were or not, don't really know, but at least they profess that. At the time of this recording, there is no individual has been a female president, although in my opinion, I don't believe that would be a bar to office. I'm sure out of 330 million Americans, there will be someone who won't vote for a candidate for president because of her sex. I'm also fairly certain that there will be somebody that will vote for a candidate for president as a female simply because of her sex. But by and large, I don't believe that would enter into the equation. We have had, obviously, with the nomination of Hillary Clinton, a major party nominate a female candidate, and for the most part, her sex was not an issue. People talked about her record, her qualifications, and so forth. Most all presidents have come from the East or the West Coast. We haven't had too many from the interior, too many candidates from the interior part of the United States. Roles of the president. The president of the United States performs many roles in the United States political system. Two that are frequently confused are chief of state and chief executive. The chief of state, that role refers to the ceremonial or symbolic head of the country. The President of the United States is said to embody the American people or represent the American people. In this role, he performs very much of the functions that the British monarch does. The chief executive role is the person who's actually responsible for running the government. The President is the chief executive. He has the executive authority of the United States, and according to the Constitution, he is to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed. In a presidential system, these roles of chief of state and chief executive, or in comparative politics, we would say head of government, head of state, are fused into one person. In a parliamentary system, we would typically see these roles being separated into two different individuals, usually referred to as a prime minister, and then if the country has a monarch, the monarch, or if the country does not have a monarch, you would see that in a form of a president who has incredibly limited power. The president is said to be the chief legislator in the United States. This is not to say that the president is a member of the legislative branch, but he does have a great impact on the process of legislation and on the type of bills that are passed. The president possesses numerous legislative powers that we will address later on. The president is the commander-in-chief. What is meant by this term is that the president has direct command over the military. The president can actually command troops in the field. Now, modern presidents obviously don't do this. Modern presidents rely upon their general staff to go ahead and take care of military operations, but the president does have direct command of the military. The reason why the Constitution established this is to prevent some sort of control of the civilian population by the military. And history has borne out time and time again that if the civilian population does not control the military, frequently the military will be used to control the civilian population. The president is also the chief diplomat of the United States. The president is responsible for U.S. foreign policy. In fact, in this role, the president perhaps has the greatest unchecked power compared to the other roles. Typically, the president would will engage in foreign policy directly, or he will do it frequently through his ambassadors, or even more frequently than that would be the Secretary of State. The president is also said to be the chief of his party. This is not to say that the president runs his party day to day. Day-to-day operations of a political party, or of the two major parties, are handled by the national chairman. But the president is said to be the head of his party, and the term that is used by both parties is titular head. And what that means is moral authority, figurehead. The person has a guiding force over the party, and the president has a lot to say about what his political party does, even if he's not concerned with the day-to-day operations of his party. The principal informal power, once again, informal power of the president with regard to his ability, with regard to his party, is his ability to pick the party chairman. Presidents of the United States have the unofficial or informal power to pick the party chairman. In both major parties, the national chairman is selected by the National Committee, but in reality, if a party holds the White House, that National Committee will almost always pick whoever the president says he would like to see as national chairman. The president, as we said, is chief legislator of the United States, and this means that, and the reason why we say that is he has significant legislative powers. The president's legislative powers include the ability to approve or veto legislation. Whenever the Congress of the United States passes a piece of legislation and sent to the president for his consideration, he has four basic options, and if you'll learn it this way, it's a lot easier. The president can sign the piece of legislation. If the president signs the bill becomes law. The president can veto the legislation. If the president vetoes the legislation, it will not be a law unless the Congress, by 2/3 vote in both houses, can override his veto. The veto is incredibly effective. Only 4% of vetoes have been overridden, so that's to say the veto is 96% effective. Best use of the veto on the part of presidents is to threaten the use of the veto to force Congress to negotiate. Now, what would happen if the president does nothing? The most common thing that happens is when the president receives a bill, he does nothing, and then it becomes a law if Congress is in session. Let me say that one more time. The most common thing, the most likely course of action or likely action that happens with a piece of legislation is that Congress passes it, it's sent to the president does nothing, and if Congress is in session, it will become a law. So most bills that are presented to the president become law without the president's signature. The last option is incredibly rare, and it's called a pocket veto. What happens is the Congress passes a piece of legislation, they give it to the president, and then they adjourn before the president has a chance to act on it. So if the president does nothing and Congress is not in session, then the bill does not become a law. This is called a pocket veto. It's incredibly rare because what Congress typically does is they finish with their business, they give the president the last piece of legislation, and they hang around for 10 days to preclude the president from exercising the pocket veto. So vetoing a piece of legislation, the pocket veto is just something that we don't see. The president does not have the line item veto. And what that means is the president cannot veto a part of a bill. He must either sign the bill in its totality or veto the bill in its totality. He can't pick and choose the parts of the bill that he likes. This is particularly important with regard to spending bills. Most presidents would like to have the ability to approve a piece of legislation, but to veto individual provisions that they believe would constitute wasteful spending. Most state governors in the United States do have the line item veto, but the President of the United States does not. What Congress frequently will do is they will package into legislation provisions that the President doesn't like, and that would actually then preclude him from being able to veto them. They'll put it into a bill that he does like, so it's kind of like saying, oh, you don't like this? Well, we'll put it in a piece of legislation that you do like, and let's see if you go ahead and veto that. Another power of the president is the ability to propose legislation. The Constitution of the United States gives the president the explicit power to propose legislation. Smart presidents usually confine their legislative agenda to 3, 4, maybe 5 items at the most, because that allows the president to focus on a few policy initiatives, and he can keep his staff and his other resources tuned to those initiatives. If the president becomes too distracted by too many issues, the president is more than likely going to be not quite as effective as he would be otherwise. So the president does have the ability to propose legislation and recommend and give that to Congress to recommend it, but he does not have the power to introduce it. Formally introducing a bill into the House or the Senate is a function that only members of Congress can have.